Welcome to this orientation program. I anticipate that this will take about an hour. Due to Mac and Windows incompatibility, we will not be hearing Barry and Sally's voices, only their wisdom. Thank you for watching this experiment. It is designed to replace the nearly 3 hours of orientation that historically has occurred during Central Committee. We hope it meets your needs both now and in the future, as you may find it useful as a reference. In the email inviting you to participate in this training was a link to an orientation document. This compendium of orientation documents contains copies of documents we will reference during the presentation. It is available for download through this link to the FGC website, and we will later detail how to access the relevant web pages, as well as the Blue Book. You may find it helpful to be able to review the compendium documents as we discuss them, and a printed version of the ebook might be useful for you, though please note that it is 26 pages in length. These document page number references may help you follow along. The Blue Book, in contrast, is more useful as a reference on the workings of FGC, a Policies and Procedures Manual. Indeed, many of the compendium documents are found in the Blue Book. Let me invite you into settling together in some grounding worship. Thank you. Hello, I'm Frank Birch, a member of Schuylkill Monthly Meeting, Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, and I serve FGC as presiding clerk. I can often be found listening on the phone. And this is Barry Crossnow, a member of Arch Street Monthly Friends, Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. He is also a former member of both Dallas Friends Meeting in South Central Yearly Meeting and Santa Fe Monthly Meeting in Intermountain Yearly Meeting. He serves Friends as the General Secretary of FGC. FGC began as a joint effort by the First Day School Conference, the Friends Religious Conference, the Friends Educational Conference, and the Friends Union for Philanthropic Labor, resulting in the Friends General Conference. It has grown from the original 7 affiliated yearly meetings to its current size and may grow further. It strives to support, not supplant, the work of its constituents and is turning increasing attention to how FGC can foster collaboration between its members. It remains a volunteer-driven organization, benefiting from the extraordinary supportive work of its staff, comprised of about 13 FTEs. As a result, there are 2 streams of effort supporting the work of FGC, with volunteers under the care of the presiding clerk, and the staff under the care of the General Secretary. It's important to grasp the roles, responsibilities, and authority of these 2 bodies laboring together to accomplish what we understand to be Spirit's work for us. Central Committee, comprised of volunteers representing and being drawn from our constituent meetings, exercises the fiduciary and other responsibilities carried by a governing body. while the staff operate under the mandate granted by the Central Committee for implementation of that committee's directives. As our staff is responsible for completion of work designated by Central Committee, they must also have some operational authority to accomplish that work. In practice, this means that volunteers and staff work closely together and hold each other faithfully accountable. What distinguishes FGC from other well-known Quaker organizations? While FGC shares many of the concerns of other Friends organizations, it's primarily focused upon the spiritual and religious concerns of Friends. Unlike Friends Committee on National Legislation, FGC does not engage in political action. Nor does it attempt service work like the American Friends Service Committee. FGC certainly has an interest in conversations with other branches of the Religious Society of Friends, yet it defers to the Friends World Committee for consultation to shoulder the bulk of that work. FGC lacks the focus of right sharing of world resources on issues of proper stewardship. FGC has benefited greatly from the dedication, skills, wisdom, and energy of the Quaker Voluntary Service Fellows, while offering them training and experience. Other organizations have noted the importance of FGC's role of supporting the spiritual vitality of the Religious Society of Friends, as our faith undergirds and supports their work. The leadership of other Friends organizations, such as AFSC and FCNL, have spoken of the importance of FGC's work on a number of occasions. As one friend put it, FGC tends the spiritual roots of our tradition, while AFSC and FCNL help give expression to some of the fruits of our spiritual practices. In the lives of individual friends, there is often no distinction between their spiritual journey and their activism. These constantly inform one another. From an organizational standpoint, legally, FGC is a nonprofit organization that cannot engage in lobbying work. This is why FCNL exists. Also, we recognize that while all friends are informed by many of the same spiritual practices, those practices give rise to a host of different leadings. Therefore, a multiplicity of Quaker organizations such as EQUAT, CFSC, and AFSC have grown up to express these leadings. FGC has been clear that our purpose is to nurture the community of spiritual practice itself, and that friends who are drawn to direct action will use the vehicle of other Quaker organizations for those efforts. Some have expressed that they believe FGC's ministry on racism work is political. We are clear that issues around equality and equity are spiritual issues, and that learning to be in right relationship among friends within our religious society is a core part of the spiritual journey. Ministry on racism is primarily concerned with building Quaker communities of practice that are a reflection of both the diversity of the creation and an expression of communion with that which is larger than ourselves, as well as with that that binds us one to another. We are aware that the tools and understandings we share among friends are then often used in our larger international struggle for justice and love, which is beyond our mandate. With that said, we celebrate this and applaud those who then use these tools and understandings in conjunction with FCNL, AFSC, CFSC, and non-Quaker organizations mobilizing for equality. Again, FGC is concerned primarily with serving the spiritual journey of Friends. However, our interaction with the broader world is limited and yet important. At times of crisis such as 9/11, FGC has been known to share messages of love, hope, and empathy, as well as service, through a moral and spiritual lens, to affirm to the broader world that Friends are walking in solidarity with them at a difficult time. FGC has also been clear that we serve as a voice for Friends in ecumenical circles through our membership in the World Council of Churches and in our attendance of the Parliament of World Religions. We view this as a form of service to Friends and people of many faiths as we seek to build peace and fellowship through mutual understanding and promote cooperation. While most affiliated meetings with FGC are unprogrammed, there are a number of pastored meetings and churches, especially within yearly meetings that are affiliated with both FGC and FUM. FGC communications will often refer to both meetings and churches. As members of governance, it's also important for you to keep this in mind, as meetings and pastored churches both have great similarities and sometimes different needs. Keeping this in mind is important to make sure we serve all affiliated Friends well. I invite you to read this to yourself. You have already heard about FGC nurturing the spiritual vitality of the Religious Society of Friends. This is its origin. FGC's recent work has responded to the call of the three priorities. The Spiritual Deepening Program seeks to support Friends in their quest of a transformative spiritual experience. The institutional assessment of structural racism is an example of FGC's efforts to help create the blessed community by first examining ourselves. The recent Quaker Quest and New Meetings projects supported outreach. One of the major areas of focus for this Central Committee meeting is to learn what the institutional assessment of structural racism will teach us and how FGC can respond to correct these inequities. Take another moment to read this. And to read this second part. This vision statement was approved after several years of work, and yet, in keeping with our belief in continuing revelation, our vision should become clearer as we worship and work together. FGC has labored without unity on refreshing this 6-year-old aspirational statement, as well as the Minute of Purpose, which might also be termed a mission statement. Central Committee has the responsibility to consider what God would have of us, what is FGC's work, and how to accomplish it. What are our funding constraints and opportunities? What will be our core programs? We will be called to approve an annual budget as well as committee nominees in this Central Committee meeting, as usual. FGC is strongly called to help Friends experience the deep spiritual reality that we are all the many faces and hands of God, to understand each other deeply in our similarities and our differences. Help us to respect, support, and encourage one another. FGC is committed to helping Quaker practice communities and FGC itself become supportive communities for people of all races, genders, sexual orientations, ages, and economic backgrounds. FGC's institutional assessment of institutional structural racism is a significant example of this commitment. We also recognize we have much work to do on a number of fronts to realize the beloved community. FGC strives to maintain an integrity of its programs by ensuring that they fulfill our three priorities, while having significant integration across its programs, as these are some of our current areas of focus. So that the work being done by hundreds of volunteers and staff can benefit from the collaborative efforts both between FGC and its constituents as well as between constituents. Central Committee will have the opportunity to season the challenge of how to facilitate such collaboration. FGC, for much of the past decade, has been called to help Quaker practice be more visible to seekers and to help Quaker meetings be more welcoming to newcomers. Please take time to read through the FGC Hallmarks of Communication after this presentation. Its intention is to help FGC have a common and meaningful voice, even as hundreds of us do the work. What is your role as a representative to Central Committee? You are the link between FGC and constituent meetings. What programs, actions, leadings, or learnings can your organization share? What could your meeting do to answer the needs of another meeting? What can you share with your yearly and monthly meeting about FGC and its programs, its volunteers, and its needs that will help FGC live successfully into its work? What can you say that will help induce other friends to participate in FGC and its programs? The value of an illustrative story is great. Educate your meeting and its members about FGC programs that would benefit them. Come to Central Committee having read and reflected upon all the advanced materials, and listen deeply to the messages of others. Feel empowered to speak of your truth and of your yearly, monthly meetings condition. Central Committee has a fiduciary responsibility for good stewardship of its resources in which you can participate. Participate actively as a volunteer in the work of FGC. Acknowledging the importance of a particular piece of work is easy, but your involvement in carrying out that work both matters and is satisfying. All Central Committee members are invited and expected to participate in FGC's work by serving on a committee. FGC has so many committees, how can you find a home and participate? Until recently, committees were divided into program versus administrative committees. This was a useful separation, as program committees' service choices were self-selected, while administrative committee service required nomination by the nominating committee. Though this dichotomy has been blurred, some committees are still populated by nomination from nominating committee, while another committee requires mutual discernment between the volunteer and the committee clerk, as well as with nominating committee, and some still remain populated by self-selection, most notably the Long Range Conference Planning Committee, which is responsible for gathering and other conferences. We'll explore this in a moment. FGC is a volunteer-driven organization, so what is the role of our staff members on committees? Indeed, many committees have a staff member supporting their work. These staff members are critical to the committee's successful engagement with its work. These staff work closely with the committee clerk rather than with the other committee members, ensuring efficient use of their time and consistency of expectations. While the staff member supports the committee clerk and the committee's work, and their in-depth knowledge is important for the discernment work of the committee, in times of decision-making, they're expected to not participate in the actual finding of unity of the committee. It should be emphasized that committee staff have a direct relationship with the committee clerk, not with members of the committee, except during meetings. As the General Secretary is held accountable for overseeing the implementation of the directives of the governing board, committee staff members are ultimately responsible to the General Secretary. The committee, through its clerk, has an abiding interest in the success of the staff member. On the rare occasion of controversy, it is the responsibility of the General Secretary and the presiding clerk, working together, to ensure that comity and an effective relationship is preserved for the benefit of the organization and its work. You will find a copy of the most recent version of the FGC organizational chart and a staff organizational chart in your orientation documents, items 13 and 14. In addition to serving on Central Committee at its annual meeting, volunteering in FGC's work is an important contribution of Central Committee members. One reason for the large size of FGC's Central Committee is to ensure that there is a body of volunteers familiar with both FGC and its constituent meetings who are excitedly called to the efforts of FGC. Another is to ensure that the needs of FGC's member meetings are heard, understood, and addressed, though such addressing might not be the direct work of FGC, rather could be met by a collaborative relationship between meetings. Yearly and monthly meeting representatives appointed by their organization serve in this role as such a conduit, but there are also co-opted members of Central Committee. Co-opted members are friends not nominated as representatives by their meeting who are invited by FGC to serve on Central Committee because of their specific gifts or leadings for a piece of FGC's work. It is worth noting that some members of working groups may not be on Central Committee members at all, but rather are invited to serve on that working group because of their gifts and calling. Such working group members are not expected to attend Central Committee meetings or participate in Central Committee decisions. How can you serve on a committee? All members of Central Committee are expected to offer committee service, and all committee member names are formally presented by nominating a committee for approval by Central Committee. Some committee memberships require careful consideration by nominating committee to ensure that the interested volunteer has the necessary experience and skill to serve effectively, such as these administrative committees, Personnel, Finance, Nominating, Development, and the Committee for Policy, Strategy, and Infrastructure. While others are open to all who are called to that work, so their nomination is primarily important to ensure that their interest and participation is formally recognized. These include the Long Range Conference Planning Committee, LRCP, the Christian and Interfaith Relations Committee, CIRC, and the Publications and Distribution Committee, P&D. One committee does expect a clearness conversation with the clerk as well as with nominating committee. This helps ensure that prospective committee members understand the work of the committee and whether they are most drawn to a specific working group within this large committee, as this committee has a very extensive portfolio of work. It's the Committee for Nurturing Ministry. Notably, some committees' working groups are time-limited and short, others of longer or even indefinite duration. But with each, the focus of the work is more limited than is true for committees. What is a working group? The term generally has replaced other names for smaller groups such as ad hoc committees, although you will still find some older terminology persisting within the Blue Book awaiting its revision. Working groups are formed and exist under the care of a standing committee. Standing committees include central and executive committees, though it's not common for them to appoint working groups. Program and administrative committees more frequently use working groups. Working group members who are not central committee members are invited into service by the sponsoring standing committee clerk. These working group members are not expected to attend Central Committee's annual meeting. It is significant to note that the duration of a working group is determined by the parent standing committee's discernment of the need for its work to continue. The inclusion of at least one member of the sponsoring standing committee helps ensure continuity and communication between the committee and the working group. You may be thinking, I want to serve on a committee. How can I advance my interest? Talk to the committee clerk to confirm that your understanding of the committee's work is accurate. Sometimes committee names don't fully convey the work of the committee. This is especially true of the Committee for Nurturing Ministries, as its portfolio of work is very extensive. And then, communicate your interest in this service to the nominating committee clerk. Nominating committee has the responsibility for not only matching the gifts and leadings with relevant committees, but also ensuring proper balance within committees and across committees. Each committee has a liaison from nominating committee, and this person may be in contact with you to season your interest further. If you feel called to serve on one of these committees, the nominating committee clerk is Sally Weaver Summer, and she or the liaison would happily talk with you. 3 committee members are self-identified. Identify your desire to serve to the nominating committee and to the committee clerk. You can understand why these committees are so often referred to by their acronyms: Long Range Conference Planning Committee, LRCP, Christian and Interfaith Relations, CIRC, and Publications and Distribution, P&D. Although nominating committee commonly reviews prospective members with a committee clerk, only one committee is formally populated by mutual discernment of its clerk, nominating committee, and prospective members. The Committee for Nurturing Ministries, often referred to as CNM. If interested, you should discuss your interest in serving on CNM with its current clerk, Jean Marie P. Barch, who can then put you in touch with the right person on nominating committee. You're welcome to drop in on a committee's meeting at Central Committee in order to test whether you are indeed so led to serve. Note that the Long Range Conference Planning Committee meets before the official beginning of Central Committee at 2 p.m. on Thursday afternoon. If you arrive early, you are welcome to sit in. Not all committees meet at Central Committee time, however, so a call to a committee clerk may be necessary. At the end of this presentation, you will find information on each clerk. Although we try to avoid excessive use of acronyms, many committees are often referred to by their initials. You'll note that these are commonly shortened names in parentheses. If you seek more understanding of the work of each committee, review the FGC Standing Committees document, number 12, in your orientation documents, or the Blue Book for more in-depth descriptions. FGC's fundings come from a variety of sources. As you'll see in the sample budget, FGC has income from individual donors, monthly meetings, and yearly meetings, as well as foundations, and from fees and charges related to some of our events and services. Central Committee members, given your role, are crucial to the financial well-being of the institution on a number of levels. We recognize that members of Central Committee have different gifts to contribute to the work of FGC. Sometimes it's time and insights. Sometimes it's a specialized skill. Sometimes it's money. For many friends, it's all of the above. Making a financial contribution is not required. It is, however, incredibly helpful. We also know that many of you support FGC by paying your own way to meetings and events. Please inform us of what you've spent. It helps FGC and foundations have a deeper understanding of how many resources are really going into the work of FGC. Please take a moment to look at the sample form. As Central Committee members, you are legally responsible for FGC's financial affairs. Helping FGC fulfill its mission and being a good steward of its available resources is one of your primary duties. Central Committee is responsible for reviewing and approving FGC's annual budget. FGC looks at fundraising as a ministry. It's an opportunity to partner with donors to create a world that reflects our dreams and aspirations. As mentioned earlier, giving is not required, and your financial contributions make a very real impact when you do give. The financial contributions of Central Committee members have often been key to certain programs and projects moving forward. Also, some foundations like to see that a large percentage of our governance members are supporting FGC with their own money. They see this as a sign of commitment. For foundations, any size gift is positive. They want to see that people care enough to give of their own earnings as well as their own time. On the FGC contribution income statement in the orientation packet, you'll see some important trends. First, the annual fund has been between $600,000 and $800,000 for most of this past decade, with peaks in current dollars being fiscal year 14 and 17. We therefore have a fairly reliable and healthy annual fund, though for inflation reasons it does need to grow. As you can see, we've actually lost a little ground when you compare inflation numbers for '06 versus 2017 at the right of the graph. What you'll also see is that our overall income has declined from a peak of about $1.3 million in 2008. From 2007 through 12, we were in a campaign that raised significant extra income. Then, from 2012 through 14, we had a 3-year non-renewable grant that helped keep our overall giving level higher as well. Starting with 15, we've been paying our bills mostly using the annual fund and reserves that we had accumulated in past years. Knowing that our reserves could not support that level of spending long term, we have been working hard the past 3 fiscal years to decrease spending to sustainable levels while seeking ways to raise additional income. As you'll see in FGC's year-end financial report, we've successfully closed our deficit for 2018 to within $19,000 of sustainable, as defined by the Finance Committee. While this is a remarkable improvement, it does not alleviate the need to continue to look closely at our spending and income. You'll see that the coming fiscal year is not projected to be break-even, though again it is a substantial improvement versus previous years such as 2015 and 2016. Further, the organization has long-term needs that will likely require additional income. Some of these needs are likely best met by raising additional funds in the form of long-term endowments that can provide stable income over a long period of time. Something important to consider when discussing future income and endowments is the role of bequests. The green bars on the income sheet show bequests. We're enormously grateful that friends who love FGC remember us in their wills and estates. Bequest income is tremendously important to smooth out variations in other forms of giving. If numerous and or large enough, they can also help us build reserves from which we can harvest steady income. We hope more friends will place FGC and other Quaker institutions in their wills. To this end, FGC's partners with Everence to help Quakers with their end-of-life financial planning. Tracy Jelt Sullivan, our Associate Secretary for Development, can tell you more. FGC also has a permanent endowment. As an endowment, we cannot spend the principal, and instead we harvest the earned income. FGC's permanent endowment is actually small for a 118-year-old institution. Our hope is to enlarge it over time so that it becomes a firmer foundation for the organization. The Development Committee steers FGC's fundraising strategies and policies. This committee has been instrumental over the years in helping FGC develop a strong annual fund and to launch 2 major fundraising campaigns. While FGC had a successful major fundraising campaign in the 1990s and another in the late 2000s, we have not yet launched one in this decade. A feasibility study in 2015 said we were not ready. Many donors were fatigued and wanted to see us bring our spending down rather than attempt a new campaign. Since that time, we have reduced our spending by hundreds of thousands of dollars per year in an effort to become sustainable. However, we're not sustainable yet, and we have important discernment ahead at this Central Committee meeting concerning how we might increase income and/or reduce our spending. You can help support fundraising efforts by promoting the work of FGC in your yearly and monthly meetings, as well as your own circle of friends. Quaker process is fundamental to committee functioning, especially Central Committee and Executive Committee. As stipulated by our state Articles of Incorporation, Executive Committee is the organization's board of directors and as such is broadly representational. Committees, with the support of our staff, carry out the work of FGC and also serve as a place to develop and season proposals for consideration by Executive and Central Committee. Committees and their clerk decide how to carry out the work, sometimes allocating it to an individual or a small cluster of individuals, at other times assigning the work to a formal working group. For clear accountability, staff report hierarchically to the General Secretary, and as a Quaker institution, staff seeks to work in a highly collaborative, open, and transparent manner. The Blue Book is the most useful compendium of guidance on our practices and procedures. Even the most experienced among us frequently consult it for help. Although committee meetings are arranged in advance with an attention to enabling the greatest attendance, individual needs sometimes prevent participation. If this happens to you, please let the clerk know of your absence in advance of the meeting. FGC is only as strong as its volunteers. We do not have enough staff or funding for staff to carry out all the work that FGC is called to. Please discern your ability to carry out a piece of work carefully before volunteering for a task. Your co-members depend upon your commitment. In the rare occasion when you find yourself unable to complete your commitment, please let your clerk know promptly so that alternative arrangements can be attempted. Staff have more to do than they really have time to accomplish. In order to honor their time constraints, please do not communicate with them directly, but rather approach your committee clerk with your concern or need. They do have a direct working relationship with the staff who support the work of the committee, so as to make the most efficient use of our staff's time and expertise. As you come to know the work of the committee, names of other friends who might be called to the work may come to you. Please share these ideas with your committee clerk and/or nominating committee. Most committees have a limited amount of money available to support the cost of travel for their members to committee meetings. Discuss your needs with your committee clerk. If you are able to pay for your own travel expenses, don't forget to file the form documenting unreimbursed travel expenses. This documentation supports your own charitable contribution deduction on your taxes and helps FGC demonstrate volunteer support and contributions when seeking support from donors. This web address is non-intuitive. I suggest you bookmark it in your web browser. The link is also posted on the Central Committee website. The link is also in your orientation documents. Clerking a committee meeting is only the top of the iceberg that is the work of a clerk. Clerks create agendas, support the work of the members of the committee, follow up to ensure that work is progressing and being completed, serve as a liaison to other committees, clerks, and staff, write reports, and offer guidance and sometimes even personal support to committee members. These clerks support committee clerks and the General Secretary. They are the final go-to people for our volunteers. Along with the General Secretary, they present an external face of the organization, respond to questions, ideas, and concerns, both from within and without the organization. As do committee clerks, these clerks plan and lead meetings, follow up on work, and connect the many pieces of service offered by FGC. They are open to hearing directly from you. If you don't already have one, please open a Quaker Cloud account. By setting up a username and password, you can access the Central Committee Cloud site and all the documents that pertain to our session. If you join a committee that has a cloud page, you can also access documents for your page on the same committee login. You can also use this account to change your contact information in the FGC master database. If you ever want to become the administrator of your committee's cloud page, or you just want to understand this tool in depth, tutorials are available at this address. An important feature of the Quaker Cloud is that documents, like meeting minutes, can be given visibility permissions. You can choose whether your document is viewable by your committee only or whether it can be searchable on the FGC website. FGC has several conference call numbers for committees to use. If your committee wants to use one, please make a request to our administrative associate, Susan Lee Barton. She holds the calendar and can make sure that committees don't actually attempt to use the same conference line at the same time. FGC also has a Zoom account to allow groups to video conference with one another. Again, schedule your committee's Zoom usage through Susan Lee. She will confirm that your requested time is available and send out the web link to your committee members along with instructions. Please schedule at least a week in advance and, if possible, weeks in advance. Susan Lee works part-time and last-minute requests may not be possible. Given the size of Central Committee and the limitations of the technology that we can afford, we do not offer remote attendance during Central Committee. Multiple remote friends often cannot hear or be heard clearly, which is disruptive to the flow of the discernment. With that said, we do occasionally allow presentations via phone or video when necessary. A single presenter can be well heard by the body with our current technology, and the clerk can often pass on questions from the body so that the presenter can clearly hear them. All external print and electronic communications, such as program promotion, are distributed by FGC staff to ensure consistency of voice and message. Committee members do very helpfully compose first drafts and sometimes help with the editing of external communication pieces before staff distribute them. FGC encourage you to post about FGC events and opportunities on your personal Facebook and Twitter accounts. With that said, please do not use social media when in committee meetings or Central Committee plenary sessions. We ask that all friends remain present with one another and with spirit while we do the work of FGC in service to friends. If you wish to see our communication style guide, it's available from our communications manager, Marta Rusick. In your orientation packet is the Hallmarks of FGC Communications document. It will help you understand staff's choices concerning tone and language while helping you effectively develop materials for external audiences should you choose to do so. Given the constant barrage of email, mail, and other communications that people receive, it's important for friends to be able to recognize FGC communications at a glance. With this in mind, FGC tries to consistently use its logo, formatting, and colors to achieve this end. While we recognize visual cues are only part of branding, it's nonetheless important. We also look periodically at larger issues concerning our brand, such as how friends perceive our mission, effectiveness, and importance. The conflict of interest policy and the ethical standards policy are Quaker versions of typical corporate policies that are important to the organization, financial donors, and our financial auditors. Each committee is expected to review them annually, and each member to consider and affirm them. As a new member of Central Committee, please review them yourself. If you have a question or a concern, feel free to explore it with the presiding or assistant presiding clerks. FGC strives to be part of the beloved community, a welcoming community to all of God's children. This policy establishes a pattern of expectations whose precepts focus upon sexual harassment, but have relevance for other forms of unwelcome interpersonal exchanges. Early Friends sought to create the kingdom of God on earth. Edward Hicks depicted it as the peaceable kingdom, and Martin Luther King Jr. talked about it as the beloved community. In all cases, we seek to be mutually supportive, to listen to that of God in one another, to work constructively through our conflicts, and to seek relationship as foundational to spiritual life and practice. Racial inequality is damaging to the oppressed and the oppressor. Racism creates obstacles to the realization of the seed of God that is within every human being. FGC views decolonizing our minds, of unwinding ourselves from systemic racism, as a spiritual practice that is foundational to being in deeper relationship with one another. Understanding one another's life experiences around race, both personally and systemically, can help us be mutually respectful and collaborative. The same is true for ethnicity. There is a variety of theological positions among friends. Theism and non-theisms are but one example of this. Please avoid making assumptions about others' beliefs and how it might influence them. Please be an open listener concerning the spiritual journeys of those with whom you are collaborating. There is extraordinary richness in our diversity, and sometimes our deepest learnings come from those with whom we differ. Sexual orientation and gender identity are additional areas where being in respectful relationship with one another and listening deeply are vitally important. FGC is working to create a safe and welcoming environment where people with differing orientations and identities can be open and mutually supportive. At FGC events, you will see name tags often showing the preferred pronouns of the wearer as one example of these efforts. FGC also recognizes that friends have widely differing financial circumstances, and it is vitally important that everyone feels welcome and part of the community. Friends with substantial means and friends with limited means often feel financial issues most acutely within the community. The first because having financial resources is seen negatively by some, and they feel this judgment. The latter because limited means can make it hard to travel to events and fully participate. FGC asks that we each suspend judgment and have some awareness of how finances can impact relationships, and to work constructively with one another if these issues do arise. In particular, FGC has set aside travel funds to help friends participate in FGC activities who might otherwise find it difficult. Being together and bringing our diverse experiences into community is necessary to experiencing the fullness of that which is greater. When confidentiality is requested, it is vital that we maintain it. Keeping confidence after worship sharing around personal issues, etc., builds the conditions necessary for this organization to thrive and fosters personal growth in the course of your journey with FGC. Of course, if someone's safety is at stake or keeping a confidence would be counter to your integrity or the right order of the community, please speak with the clerk of the committee or the presiding clerk to determine the best way forward. Have fun. Central Committee service is deeply important and can also be very enjoyable. There are many members who have created lifelong friendships through their service at FGC. It's an incredible opportunity to be in deep fellowship with people who care deeply about the people we serve and one another. This is part of the reason why some friends choose to serve on Central Committee for many years. To help you visualize FGC's structure, the current organizational chart is the penultimate document in your orientation documents. For those interested, a current staff chart is in your organization documents as well, the last one in the list. We hope that this presentation has been informative for you as you step into the critical role of serving as a bridge between your yearly or monthly meetings and FGC, serving as a member of FGC's governing body and as a volunteer for FGC's call to serve its constituency and the wider world of friends. This is an experiment intended to use your time more efficiently and to provide you with a reference. Please look for and respond to an evaluation form you will receive after Central Committee's meeting. Please join us at Friday's lunchtime meeting in the auxiliary dining room to meet us. Bring your questions and enthusiasm. If your questions can't wait, email us before then at fgcclerk@gmail.com. Thank you so much for being part of our FGC family. In the following slides, you will find information about how to contact our committee clerks. This is the end of the self-running portion, so please click on your computer spacebar to advance through the clerk's slides. Thank you again. Thank you. Hello, I'm Frank Birch, a member of Schuylkill Monthly Meeting, Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, and I serve FGC as presiding clerk. I can often be found listening on the phone.